Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Erica with Memory Box Candle Co. and I make videos all about making and selling candles. And this video is another Make Candles with Me video, but I did actually have a recent request for me to not talk about the topics that I typically do, where I just kind of rant about different business topics or sometimes personal topics. And I'm actually going to go through more of an informational video for you guys today. So I'm going to walk you through the whole process. So the first thing that I do is I laid out all of my jars from the boxes and I have my little bottle of alcohol. I do like to put on gloves just because I find that the alcohol dries out my hands, and the alcohol is just normal rubbing alcohol that I just put into a little spray bottle because it's easier. And then I take my Cali jars. These are the 13.5 ounce Cali jars that I get from California Candle Supply. And I just go through all of them and I spray them down because if you noticed before in that other clip, they have dust and different particles from the cardboard inside of them. And I do not want that at the bottom of my jars. And I have noticed before in the past that the wick stickers do not stick to the bottom if you don't actually go through and clean down all of the jars. So I have to make sure that I do that first. And then once everything is dried up at the bottom of the jar, I can take my wicks, and I now use the CDN size 2 wicks. I get mine from both 1617 as well as West Coast Candle Supply, but I'm sure there's a bunch of different suppliers. And I always hand the bags over to Chris and he's able to wick them with the wick stickers. And then I use this cool little device that I got from an Etsy shop, and I will have it linked down below. I believe he has started making them, but it just is a really cool device that helps me wick the jars so much faster. So I'm able to just put the wicks in there, take off the wick stickers, and then I'm able to just kind of put it into the jar and it lines everything up. So it keeps the wicks about an inch apart, which is what you want when you're double wicking, and it just sits in there. I'm able to push down on the springs and I kind of do twice on either side. And then when I take it out, you're able to see that it quote unquote perfectly wicks it. Sometimes it's not completely perfect, but for the most part it is. And then I take these little wick holders, which again is from that Etsy shop. I will have it linked down below. Don't worry. I know you guys always ask me about those. And I just go through and I put the little wicks through the holes and it keeps it at that distance as well. So about an inch apart. And there are little holes on the side of the wick holders, but for some reason, I like to actually just twist it. I feel like this is, the way that it sits, the way that the wicks sit, I like it better than pulling them to the sides. When you pull them to the sides, it almost brings the wicks closer, and when you twist it, it keeps them a little bit further apart. And something I did want to show you guys in this video, if you can see me struggling trying to get this in, it has nothing to do with the actual device itself and everything to do with how my jars have been varying lately. I don't know if you guys have noticed that as well, but I can tell that some of the jars are slightly smaller or slightly more oval than some of the other jars. So then I take this other wicking device, again from that Etsy shop, super helpful. The 3D machine printers or whatever are so cool. So I'm able to just go in and manually wick it. And I like this better than using a pen just because, I don't know, I feel like it's just made to do that and it's not as, I don't know. I used to use just a pen and then you can kind of open up a pen and put the wick through it, but using this one is so much easier and it works out. As you can see, it's still a pretty good distance between the wicks and I can still wick it perfectly fine. And then after everything has been wicked, I go through and I measure out the fragrance oil on these little gram scales. I did not try to clean up, I'm sorry, I didn't try to clean up anything for you guys in this video. It just is what it is. I have these little silicone, little pouring measuring cups that I use for the fragrance oil. And I have my little scale that I put it on. And this one we are making Christmas Hearth, which is my holiday dream candle. And what I have been doing, which has helped speed up the process so much. I don't think I show it in this video. I'm just going to show you guys the first round of pouring and measuring the fragrance oils, but I make all of my candles at once of a certain scent. And that helps me so much when it comes to bulk making items. And so I go through and I measure out all the fragrance oils that I need for all of the size jars and all of the amount of jars that I need, and I put it off to the side. So before I jump to this part, I actually did go through and I measured out a bunch more fragrance oil, and now I'm going to actually make the candles. So instead of having the wax go directly into a super cold pouring pitcher, I go through and I hit it with the heat gun a little bit, and that just brings up the temperature so it's not super cold hitting onto it. And this is my little scale that I use, and I use a hot pad just to try to protect the scale as much as possible because it is pretty hot wax going into it. So then I just tear the scale, I turn on the Digiboil, and if you guys want to know more about the Digiboil, I will have it linked either in a card above or in the description box below. I go through everything about the Digiboil. You're just able to heat up a ton of wax at once, and it makes it so much easier having it already heated up to the temperature that you want it to. And although it says 176 right there, it's not actually 176. It's more of in the mid 190s, if not maybe a little bit hotter. And I think I show you guys right here, I go through with the heat gun and I actually show you what the temperature is. So it's about 193, and that to me tells me that it's between 183 and 190, because I know that with those thermal laser thermometers, it's not very accurate. I know that it's actually a little bit cooler than what it says just based off of my experience. So that's also something else that I have to keep track of in my head. And then I go through immediately and I pour in the fragrance oil. So I pour in both of those fragrance oils when it is at the hottest temperature, which is what you saw, that 193, but really it was probably more of that 185, which is really what I try to get when I am pouring in the fragrance oil. Because for me, I notice a huge difference if the wax is too cool when I pour in the fragrance oil. It doesn't have that cold throw and that hot throw that I'm looking for. So I'd rather work with those hotter temperatures. And I always like to go back in after I've stirred it and just try to get the last little bits inside of those little cups, because there is always, maybe a gram, maybe half a gram left in there, and I don't want to waste it. So then I just go in with a stir stick. I have both the wooden stir sticks as well as the glass stir sticks that I use in the background that you can see. And then I bring my set over to this melter, which is my beeswax. So I'm not going to get into my blend or anything, but I essentially just do a blend of soy 10 and beeswax. And yes, for all of you asking, I'm still using soy 10. I still love that wax, especially during the holiday time. I'm probably going to get more into trying new waxes more towards the beginning of the year, just because, oh my gosh, have I been busy. I've been so busy, you guys. So I'm going in and I'm just adding in a little bit of beeswax into this just to help bring up the overall melt point of soy 10 to help it burn better with 2 wicks in the Cali jars, because the Cali jars are only 3.25 inches. So you have to be very careful about it not burning too hot within that glass jar. And then I just go through and I stir it all together. And then I think I checked the temperature right here and it's at about 170, so like 165 or so. And to be honest, making videos like this, I do tend to pour a little bit cooler than I typically do, just because it takes me longer to adjust the camera, make sure it's all focused, all that kind of stuff. And I'm making 8 candles at a time, but I actually do 5 in the pitcher and then 3 afterwards, just because trying to have 8 candles in there at once, 8 enough to fill 8 candles, is just too much. And I have this little aluminum foil thing that I made, and essentially what it is it's just an indicator telling me when to stop pouring. So I have this thing, and then I also just got sent an indicator, a little indicator to put on the side that I've been playing around with after I made this video. So I'll probably show that in a future video as well. But it is, again, from that Etsy shop. He made a little indicator to sit on the side, and I'm kind of playing playing around with that in my most recent candle making sessions. So I'll probably, be going over that in a future video. But this little piece of aluminum foil, I gotta be honest, it's actually done pretty well for me. And if you guys are curious as to why I use that, it's just because I'm making so many candles at once and I need to know when to stop pouring, because these jars don't have an indicator line. It's not like mason jars or something like that to where you know when to stop. Or even on my 10 candles, I don't have to have an indicator because there's that little rim that goes around, so I know when to stop pouring. So what I did is you can just make enough to fill up one, and then you can take a piece of aluminum foil and then adjust it based on where it's sitting in the liquid. When you pour in that liquid wax in there, just take a piece and you can go ahead and create your own mold from there. And it has been so helpful, and I've been using it ever since the beginning. So it's actually going to be really nice to try to switch over to something that's a little bit more stable and not so flimsy like the aluminum foil, but overall it's worked really well. And something else that I've noticed when I pour my candles, especially when I am pouring all of these at once, is I have to have that first row of 5 a little bit closer inwards on the table, and then I take the rest of the 3 and I put them on the corner, just because it's easier for me to have nothing in my way when I pour, and pour a little bit further into the table and then bring those jars over, and then I can make enough to pour those 3. And then the same process goes. I just go through, I heat up the pouring pitcher, I bring over the fragrance oil that I need, and then I measure out the amount that I need. And then as soon as that is done, then I can pour in that fragrance oil. And this is pretty much the whole process when it comes to making the candles. I'm so happy that I got out of the TW30 blend, because that was just an extra step, to be honest. And it was just kind of a placeholder for trying to figure out what I needed to do to get my candles to burn better, or to burn how I wanted them to. And little did I know that it was really just about changing the wicks, because I was so stubborn and I was so stuck on using Eco ones when really I just needed to venture off and try other wicks. And the CDN series has worked really well for me so far, and I really, really like it. And it's allowed me to just do a blend of the soy 10 and the beeswax, so that's been really helpful as well. And I also have to be careful with that melter, because beeswax, I know I talked about in my Digiboil video, beeswax is so just absolutely temperamental. You have to make sure that you are having it at the right temperature. And even if it's at the right temperature, it may not actually heat up enough for the spout area. So then I have to take my heat gun and make sure I'm, heating that up. But then I just go through and I pour the rest of these candles. And again, like I said, I can't have all 8 candles in one pitcher, otherwise it's just would not be good. So I do 5 and 3. I guess I could do 4 and 4, but I'm just so used to doing 5 and 3 now. And now I'm actually going through to make the amount that I need for my 10 candles. So they're the little 6-ounce candles, and I actually make 9 of those at a time. So I found that I can have enough to make 9 inside of that pouring pitcher, and it's just low enough to where I can still have control of it. So if you guys kind of know what I mean with that, if there's so much wax in there, it's almost scary, because I feel like I can't really control when I'm pouring. So if it's halfway or lower, that's when I feel most comfortable. But for these, I think it's a little above half, and I have to be very careful when I'm first pouring those candles. But I essentially just make sure that I have it closer to the edge of the table when I'm pouring, because I can kind of rest it on the side of the table when I'm pouring over, because my biggest fear is to just pour the wax all over the place. And if I get a little drip on these on the side, it's no big deal, because I can just clean it off, because these little matte black tins clean up so much better than the Cali jars. If you get wax on the side of the Cali jars, it's over. You can't use it. So you have to be really, really careful. So if you are looking for a good thing to practice on, if you are a beginner and you're scared of, if you want to practice more with the control of the pouring pitcher, test out using like mason jars, like the straight sided jars, or even these tin jars, or they're not jars, but these little tins, because there is no ruining it. You can just wipe it off, and it's really nice. With the Cali jars are definitely not for beginners. Definitely not for beginners. You can mess up a lot of jars, and I have messed up a lot of jars before. And then about either really later on that day or the next day, I go through and I remove all of the tops of the candles. I just want to make sure that they are sturdy enough so it's not a soft wax. There's nothing worse than trying to move it when the wax is soft and you're messing with the wicks. And then I go through and I trim everything. And I got these wick trimmers custom made from Alibaba. I made a whole video on it. And I just go through and I trim it to about 1/4 of an inch. Now, this absolutely takes some practice, you guys. Getting it to 1/4 of an inch will take some practice. And don't beat yourself up if you're cutting them too short, too long. Always try to cut them a little bit too long, because you can always cut it shorter, just like getting a haircut. You can always start longer and then go a little bit shorter from there. And trust me, I have messed up before. So it's going to happen, but I just kind of can eyeball it now about what 1/4 of an inch is. It's never perfect, but it's about that much. So even doing these little 6-ounce candles, you can kind of see about where I cut it. That's about how long or how short I keep them. And then I just go through and I cut all of them. And it really helps me to kind of slightly tug on the wick, so making the wick a little bit taut, so that it's easier to cut. I found that to be the easiest way when I go to actually cutting. And then when it comes to labeling, I make sure that the label is going to be directly in front of the horizontal wicks. So I always have to make sure about that. And these label sizes are the 2.5 by 3 inch labels. And in order to make sure that I don't get bubbles, I keep the label really taut, so really tight, pulled tight in between my two hands. And I have learned with these kind of labels, which are the laser weatherproof labels, they are so thin. And I have to make sure that I am really pushing down from the middle outwards to make sure that there's no bubbles. Otherwise, bubbles get trapped in it and it drives me insane. The only thing that I absolutely love about these labels is that I'm able to remove them really, really easily. Even if they have been on there for months, they're really easy to remove. And that's something that the white gloss just could not do. And then, of course, I have to put a warning label on the bottom of all of my candles. So these are the ones that I design and sell on my Etsy shop. If you guys want to check that out, you can customize your own ones. I'll have it linked in the description box below. And then I just have it down at the bottom of the candle. I try to put that as, as straight as possible at the bottom, but sometimes it's kind of crooked or whatever. It's not a huge deal. I try to do my best. And then in terms of labeling these tins, I have the tops to the tins, and these are 2.5 inch circles. And again, with this, I have to be careful about getting bubbles. So I hold it really tight, and then I try to push inwards out. And actually recently, I also started doing like from right to left, just to kind of push all the air out, or I do like this in a circular motion and try to get all of the air out as possible. And then with these labels for the sides of the tin, I believe these are 3.75 by 1.25. I always get confused with this size, but I believe that's the size. And I just put it on its side, again, making sure that the wicks are horizontal with it. Otherwise, I just think it looks silly. I want it to look really nice when it's burning. And then I put that like that. I put the top on, and then I have a custom size warning label. I just add on the size of the candle. So at the bottom of that warning label, it says that it's 6 ounces or 170 grams, because nowhere on the actual label says the size. So I just want to make sure that I'm legally good with all of that. And then after everything's done, I just put it on my shelf, and that is my entire process, you guys. I hope that you learned something. I hope it was helpful hearing me describe everything as everything's going on. I know that a lot of you guys have suggested this before. I like bringing up other topics, but I think this is also helpful for informational purposes, only. But with that, I think I will end today's video. I really, really appreciate you guys watching. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to leave it a thumbs up as well as subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, don't forget to follow me over on Instagram at MemoryBoxCandleCo, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.